Hi everybody, welcome back. So I'm just going to show you what you do with cleavers that you forage wherever it is that you forage them. Hopefully it's in your own garden. So I've washed them. So these are the guys here. And as I explained, they're a lymphatic decongestant. So you've got more lymph system in your body than you have blood, but your lymph requires your body to physically move in order to move your lymph around. So areas that you would know, so as I say, your lymph is everywhere. So a lot of times actually when people get feel nauseous or feel physically sick, it's actually their lymph as opposed to their stomach that has a problem, because there's a lot of lymph nodes down there, particularly, not always, but particularly with kids. They often complain of a sick stomach. So lymph nodes are also in underneath your armpits. And those are areas that people might be aware that become inflamed when they're feeling a bit under the weather. And of course, usually the most evident ones for people are here, your tonsils. So if I have a scratchy throat or I'm feeling a bit poorly, I would take CLEAVERS tincture. So that's one way that I would make it every single year. And I pick CLEAVERS from the garden and I do it that way. But just one way you can use them fresh as of today, and there's a couple of different ways of doing it, but the one that I like to do is I just take a bunch of it like this. So we'll call that a handful, okay? And it's a lovely little thing actually. You can make as a nest and put your foraged goods in. So I just take it and I put it in the bottom of a teapot. So we have these nice metal ones because I like them because you can put them heat underneath them and keep them warm. And you just pour boiling water in on top of that. So I've always wanted to say what Delia Smith says. Here's one we made earlier. So this is our other metal teapot. It's the family one. So, and teacup. So you'll see the colour. I'll try and show you as closely as I can. The colour is kind of very pale. And when you see it in the cup, perhaps my assistant could push the camera down so that you can see into the cup there. No, we can't. So it's a kind of pale greeny colour. Uh-oh, he's going to get the sack as my assistant. His sister's better. Thank you. So I'm just going to move it down a little bit. Yeah, so you can add lemon or honey or something like that to that, and you've got a cup of tea. I would describe it as an earthy kind of taste. I really like it. I like it as it is. And I suppose it's probably a bit of a bitter as well as an earthy flavour. I don't mind it as it is, but you know, you can add lemon or honey to it if you like it. You can also mix it with another tea if you have a preference. Like, I don't know, I quite like spicy tea, so maybe a licorice with that for me would be really nice, licorice and cinnamon. So, as I mentioned, every year I make a tincture. So this is last year's leftover tincture. So when all of this topsy-turviness initially started happening, I took this every single day, probably for about a week. So this is made with vodka, because clear alcohol is better because there's no kind of added flavours to it, unless you buy, like I buy a very plain humdinger clear vodka, cheap and cheerful. And the alcohol helps preserve it and gives it a longer shelf life. Now, I know there are some people who may not particularly like tinctures that are made with an alcohol, but there is a way of removing it. So I'll just show you what I do with this. So if I was feeling a scratchy throat, outside of these topsy-turvy times, if I was feeling like I had a scratchy throat, or my tonsils felt they were coming up a little bit, or I had kind of a bit of difficulty swallowing or something like that, I would just take a tablespoon of this guy, and it's a kind of paley green colour like the tea, and I put it into just a regular glass like so, and I top it up with water, and I would take it like that. Okay, so of course if you don't particularly like the alcohol side of it, what you can do is put that into boiling water, and what it will do is, and leave it for a few minutes, maybe 5, and what it will do, the heat will evaporate off the alcohol. Another way somebody shared with me many moons ago when I was trying to get my kids to take it was to make up a jelly, like an ordinary regular Chivers jelly or whatever, make up the pint of it, and you can add a tablespoon or two to the hot water part, and what it will do will have the same effect. It will boil off the alcohol, top it up and pour it into something like, you know, an ice cube tray or that kind of crack. And my kids were fooled when I said, do you want to have a jelly for breakfast? Nobody was any the wiser, which I love. Love ways of getting things into people that are make them none the wiser. So to make the tincture, you just need a glass jar, or a jar that will close actually. Yeah, glass jar is better because of the alcohol. If it's plastic, you're going to leave this for 6 weeks. So if it's plastic, it might leach a little bit. So this is just a regular jar. I must get the rubber seal actually to close it up afterwards. So you take your jar. You don't have to, just washing your cleavers, maybe perhaps pulling them apart a little bit. And you can cut them if you want to, but you don't need to. So you're just going to fold them up. My assistant has just handed me a rubber ring there. Oh yes, we have plenty of them. My sourdough starter has been in and out of different Kilner jars that we have. So the bit that I foraged out in the garden there, and you're just going to shove it down as much as you can. So I'm just really rolling them up to get them to fit into the jar. So there you go. That's what I foraged from the garden. So it's what, about 3/4 of the way up. If you just look to that side now, you might see a little face emerging. So you're just going to take, I don't know, I don't need enough. Plain, simple humdinger vodka. And pour it. It's the only reason I actually ever buy vodka usually. It's not one that I partake of. So you're just going to cover your herb with this. I'm just going to use the spoon to make sure that I squeeze down all the bits. And voila, you've got the essentials of a tincture. Close your lid up. Tighten up it up. So what you do with this is you leave this for 6 weeks. Just don't put it into direct sunlight. So say top of a cupboard in, I don't know, not too warm spot, but somewhere maybe in your kitchen, if you have a utility, something like that. Just somewhere that, you know, you're not going to forget about it. It doesn't really matter if you leave it longer than 6 weeks. It just gets stronger. In fact, this tincture, gosh, I think I left it about 3 or maybe 4 months even before I strained it. It was sitting in our kitchen. It doesn't affect it. It just makes the taste or the flavour just a little bit stronger. So then when you take this out, if and when you want to take it out after 6 weeks, you merely put it through a strainer and put it into, like as you can see, I've just recycled a brown bottle there. I don't know, even remember what was in that. Or a dark coloured jar or something like that. Label it. Don't look at my jar for that. I had decanted this from a bigger bottle. Label it and just put it away. And whenever you have, as I say, a scratchy throat, sore throat, feeling a wee bit run down, this is a great lymphatic decongestant. I can't rate it high enough. So I hope you enjoyed the little lesson in cleavers, and hopefully that which before today may have been an annoyance and a weed has become that which we can put to good use. So thank you very much for being here.